I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Matt Lewis, his new book is Last Man Off. He was the last man off of the Suder Havid, a fishing boat for the Patagonian toothfish that sank in 53 degrees south, that is another part of the solar system, in 1998. But there was a review and a very detailed hearing by seamen, and what I take from Matt also is how the sea has a community of exceedingly careful human beings who review and learn from and pass on lessons of disasters and successes and rescues at sea. And the review points out things that Matt, at the time, and he participated in the review, and he provided details, and that many of the details are in this book. And he also provides a piece of the transcript of the review. And Matt, your first understanding was that the failure was in the pumps, correct?
Yeah, it was the pumps in the factory that had broken down and failed to get rid of the water.
And you faulted the engineers because that's their territory.
Yeah, just after the accident, of course, you're angry. You know, you witness a lot of suffering, and so when a lot of the engineers survived, then it was very easy to point the finger at them, and it was the pumps that had broken down, and they hadn't maintained the emergency standby properly. So I did blame them, yes.
But on further review, and you've now summarized this, you find fault with the captains, the fishing master and the captains, and also the greed, the pursuit of money. How does that work, Matt?
Well, I think the Court of Marine Inquiry in South Africa really found that Bubbles and Butty had fished too long in too rough sea conditions, that if they'd stopped, maybe they would have been able to save the boat. And I think part of the reason they fished so long was just because of the pressure on them. You know, they were just trying to catch fish and fill the boat up so that we could put into Uruguay with a full hold.
However, if they had unloaded what you had, the 55 tons you had, if they had done that, you would have been that much lighter. Would that have saved the Suder Havid? Would that have given you more time to recover?
I don't know. I guess we'll never know. But the boat was heavily laden. One of the crew had commented to me that the fact she was sitting so low in the water just before we sank, and or just before we hit trouble. And so I think the load that she was carrying was an issue. But Björgvin, who was the Icelandic captain, and who should have been able to make those decisions, he was never given the chance to actually to check the load of the boat and to check the stability.
Also, the door, the sea door that opened, that allowed the lines to come in, that seems, upon review of the way you presented this, a change in the Suder Havid that put it at risk when they put that door in. Was it built with that door?
No, when she was built in Norway, she didn't have that door. It had been a modification that had been added later. And the big problem with that door, this is a door that leads from the outside of the hull, from a balcony, into the factory just above the waterline. The big problem with that door was it opened inwards, and the doors that are going to be, coming in with a lot of water pressure, they normally open outwards, so that when the waves hit, they're actually closed more firmly. But this door had been built in so that it opened, and when the waves hit it, it was actually blown open.
You heard the explosion, in fact, when that door blew in and it broke what you call the dogs. So those are the latches that hold it together. You heard that explosion, and that's when the other men in the factory knew that you were going down, when they heard that.
Yeah, I hadn't clicked quite what that noise was and how fatal it was for the boat. But when the levers on the door broke, then there was no way to keep it closed, and that meant there was no way for us to keep the water out of the factory. And basically, that was when the back of the ship was broken. There was no hope for us to recover when the water was flowing so freely into the factory.
What about Bubbles and Boti? Why wasn't there a life raft drill? Why wasn't there a command authority? They do that routinely when they take cruises in those huge passenger liners. Was that a disruption in order? Was that a violation of sea rules?
I think if you checked the manual that they probably carried on board, the company orders, then it probably said that they had to do drills and life raft drills. I think when I joined the fishing boat, I thought it was a bit strange that they didn't do that, the drills, that they didn't do abandoned ship or life jacket drills. But I was naive, I was new to it, and I just assumed that was the way things were done on a fishing boat. You know, when you're the new person on board, you think, I'll keep my head down, they've been doing it for 20 years. that must be just the way things are done on a fishing boat.
And the commanders, Bubbles and Boaty, this strange delay. You talk at one point of one of them was gray, ashen gray. Were they in distress? Was their system breaking down even before they got into the water?
I think Bubbles had probably had a heart attack in the last few moments on board. I mean, whether it was the stress of the situation or whether it was the cold water that he'd been fallen into, but I think he probably had a heart attack. He was ill beforehand, but I think he'd had a heart attack on deck. And maybe that's why we weren't getting any orders. You know, when I started trying to coordinate the crew and started trying to yell some orders, it was because Bubbles and Butty were not. They were silent, and there was no guidance coming from the people that the crew needed guidance from the most.
Finally, a grace note. We have less than 30 seconds, Matt. Camila. Who is Camila today?
So I now have a beautiful 6-year-old daughter. She's 5 now. She's just about to turn 6. And she is named after the Isla Camila, the boat that saved us, that plucked me from the Southern Ocean. In a drunken promise in a pub a week or two after the accident, I met one of the guys that had actually pulled me onto the Isla Camila. And I said to him that one day, if I have a daughter, I'll call her Camila after your boat. And years later, I got to fulfill that promise.
Last Man Off, a true story of disaster and survival on the Antarctic seas. Matt Lewis is the author. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.